all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis 8. Red Pill Boundaries. Protect Your Mind and Life, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Red Pill Masculinity. A cold shower for comfortable lies. When a woman first declared she gauges a man's worth by his treatment of the waitress, I nearly scoffed. I held back only because I sensed the trap, though I should have sprung it. That viral platitude, repeated endlessly by dating gurus, HR directors, and Facebook relatives, is no reliable measure of goodness. It is a pledge of fealty to female rule. Virtus, the Latin ancestor of virtue, signified masculinity, bravery, martial prowess, and strength of character. It had no connection to performative, groveling deference toward a young server who overlooked your napkin. By allowing a woman to triangulate your value through a service worker, you submit to a parole hearing where she holds the warden's keys. She seeks not a good man, but a safely neutered one. If you endure cold food, poor service, and disrespect with a plastic smile merely to prove you are nice to a woman auditing your backbone, you have failed the only test that matters, the test of logos. If you pass her test, you have merely qualified for the next round of the inversion. The modern therapeutic state does not want you to be just. It wants you to be harmless. And if you refuse this sterile, harmless compliance, if you dare to be assertive, logical, or angry about injustice, the system has a diagnosis waiting for you. Welcome to the Diagnostic Inquisition. The cultural Marxists and their progressive shock troops have replaced the theological heresy of the Middle Ages with the psychiatric heresy of the 21st century. You don't have a functioning moral compass and a righteous indignation against a corrupt world. You have oppositional defiant disorder. You aren't holding a rational boundary. You are exhibiting toxic masculinity. They have weaponized the clinical clipboard to sedate the masculine soul. We live in a timeline where a boy's natural biological thumos, his competitive, spirited drive, is deemed a chemical pathology requiring amphetamines to suppress, while a fully grown woman can chop off her breasts and be hailed as brave. The inmates are not just running the asylum, they are prescribing the sedatives. And what happens to the men who refuse the sedation? What happens to the men who see through the matrix? They become punchlines. We have built a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry on the comedy of male disposability. For 50 years, we have been force-fed a relentless diet of sitcoms where the father is a bumbling, obese buffoon, and movies where a man getting violently struck in the groin is the pinnacle of comedic genius. If a woman is physically struck on screen, it is a grim, Oscar-winning tragedy highlighting a systemic epidemic. If a man's genitals are destroyed by a fastball, a laugh track plays. This is not an accident, it is the institutionalization of sadism. They tell you that male behavior is biologically determined, pre-programmed to be evil and oppressive, yet they hold you 100% morally and financially responsible for every failed relationship. Meanwhile, women are granted total, sovereign agency to redefine reality on a whim, excused of all accountability by the magical catch-all of systemic trauma. If biology is destiny, then patriarchy was an evolutionary inevitability. But they don't want logic. They want your submission, and they want you to smile while they extract your wealth and your children. But strip away the noise and look at the ledger. Count the actual empirical costs of this utopian nightmare. Men account for nearly 80% of suicides, over 90% of workplace fatalities, and 97% of combat deaths. These are the men who mine the copper, pave the roads, fix the grid, and bleed into the dirt to keep the lights on for the very ideologues who despise them. Yet we are told to sit silently, apologize for our privilege, and tip 25% so the gynocentric gaze doesn't deem us dangerous. I reject this entire bankrupt framework. We are going to tear down the gynocratic temple, brick by filthy brick, using the very Western canon they tried to burn. If this book does its job, you will never look at a waitress test the same way again. You will never accept a psychiatric label designed to silence your truth. You will stop laughing at the jokes. When you reach the final horizon of your life, when the four last things, death, judgment, heaven, and hell, are no longer abstract concepts, but the cold wind on your face, the feminine imperative will vanish like smoke. On your deathbed, the only thing that will remain is the hard, unyielding ledger of reality. Did you build? Did you protect the innocent? Did you speak the truth when the entire corrupt world demanded you smile at the lie? Turn the page. We have a civilization to reclaim, and it starts with refusing to be the punchline. The service worker shibboleth. How the gynocracy tests your soul with a salad fork. I judge a man by how he treats the waiter. This phrase is the Mott and Bailey fallacy of modern courtship, deployed universally by women and institutions as a primary shit test. The moat is an obvious defensive platitude. Decent people are polite to service workers. The insidious Bailey is the demand that a man must be infinitely accommodating, never assertive, and must never hold inferior service accountable, lest he be branded a dangerous predator. The grammar of this manipulation must be dissected. The word virtue comes from the Latin virtus, meaning manliness, courage, excellence, and strength of character. It is not performative politeness. Contrast this with modern courtesy, derived from courtesy, the behavioral affectation of courtiers seeking to appease those with power over them. The waiter test does not measure virtus, it demands courtesy. It demands you perform submission. This test is a staging ground for the clash of logos and pathos. The man who corrects a server's error, "This order is wrong," operates in the realm of logos, objective reality, commerce, and the proper order of things. The observer who condemns him operates in pathos. "He made the waiter sad." We have built a society where pathos cancels logos. Decades of romantic comedies have weaponized this trope, conditioning men to accept substandard service without complaint. The antagonist is always revealed by snapping his fingers. The protagonist is validated by leaving a massive tip. This is pure gynocratic propaganda designed to turn men into compliant ATMs who absorb incompetence with a smile. Examine the asymmetry. If a man is demanding regarding a poorly cooked steak, he is exhibiting toxic masculinity. If a woman berates a male valet, she is having a bad day or setting boundaries. In the modern corporate HR state, male assertiveness is medicalized. A man who rejects cold food is pathologized as having anger issues. This is the gamma bias of the test laid bare. The male is judged by his transactional politeness. The female is absolved by her emotional state. The test attempts an inversion of natural hierarchy, putting the man at the mercy of the service worker's feelings and the female observer's judgment. Consider the logic of this false equivalence. P1. A righteous person treats subordinates with respect. P2. Respect means acknowledging a person's humanity and paying them their due. P3. Demanding competent service that has been paid for is the essence of commercial justice. Conclusion. Therefore, calmly demanding competence is not disrespect. It is the very execution of justice. Observe the empathy gap exposed by this dynamic society. Demands infinite empathy for the waitress who forgot your order, but offers zero empathy for the man who just worked 60 hours to pay for the meal he cannot enjoy. The ledger is purposefully rigged. Consider the male plumber, the garbage collector, the mechanic. These men keep civilization alive, yet they are culturally invisible to the gynocratic eye. A man's character is never judged by how well he respects the men who actually build the world, because the feminine imperative does not value those men. The woman applying this test believes she is looking for a good man, but her definition of good is purely utilitarian to her safety and comfort. She is not looking for logos, she is looking for a compliant host. The red-pilled man refuses this triangulated frame. When a woman says, "I judge a man by how he treats the waiter," the meta-debate strategy is not to defend yourself. You counter Pierce, and I judge a woman by how she treats the men who provide for her when she offers them nothing in return. While she watches how you speak to the waiter, you must observe how she speaks about the waiter when she thinks she is safe among peers. Her performative empathy on the date evaporates into cruel, classist gossip the moment the server walks away. That is the real test. She demands you be a slave to a stranger's feelings because she imagines herself the queen of the transaction. The unspoken premise of this entire charade is the assumption that a man who is justly assertive to a subordinate is a latent tyrant. This is a lie. The modern mind commits the category error of confusing being kind with being harmless. True kindness requires strength. A service worker who fails at their job does not need a patron's saccharine smile. They need the honest correction that will prevent future failure. The man who polices his own behavior in fear of the female observer's judgment has already been castrated by the matrix. He is a performative shell. Character is not the theatrical performance of deference to the powerless. Character is the absolute commitment to the true and the good when the entire corrupt society demands you smile at the mediocre and the false. But the service worker test is merely the social front of a far more insidious machinery. A machinery that does not merely judge your assertiveness as rude, but diagnoses it as diseased. The same gynocratic impulse that demands you smile at incompetence in a restaurant has captured the institutions reserved for deciding what counts as a sound mind. Once you grasp that male standards of excellence are recoded as male pathology in every waiter interaction, you must confront the staggering reality that the very manuals defining mental health have been rewritten by the same mob logic, serving power rather than healing, and that the clinician's prescription pad has become the enforcer's baton. The diagnostic inquisition, how modernity pathologizes the male logos. In 1973, the American Psychiatric Association didn't discover new science about homosexuality. They held a vote, activists disrupted their conferences, and the board of trustees capitulated. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual was rewritten not by empirical breakthrough, but by mob fiat. 40 years later, the same manual's 5th edition manufactured gender dysphoria as a clinical category, a bureaucratic maneuver preserving insurance billing codes while appeasing a different set of activists. The DSM is not an objective catalogue of disease. It is a political weather vane spinning wherever the cultural wind blows hardest, and the wind always seems to blow against the male. This should terrify you because the precedent is older and darker than most men realize. The Soviet Union institutionalized dissidents under the diagnosis of sluggish schizophrenia, a condition whose primary symptom was rejecting Marxism. The Soviets didn't invent this trick, they merely industrialized it. When a regime cannot answer your arguments, it declares your arguments a symptom. Modern America has refined the technique. The boy who cannot sit still in a classroom engineered for female compliance gets diagnosed with ADHD. CDC data confirms boys are diagnosed at roughly twice the rate of girls. The man who refuses to mouth feminist orthodoxy is told he exhibits oppositional defiant disorder. The syringe and the script have replaced the gulag. In family court, the weaponization becomes explicit and predatory. A father who shows righteous fury at the systematic severance of his bond with his children. A rage that would be called justice in any sane era is ordered into anger management or co-parenting counseling. These are not therapeutic interventions. They are tributes extracted by a system that punishes moral clarity. You pay money, you surrender hours, you perform contrition before a counselor whose salary depends on diagnosing you with the very problem that brought you through the door. The man who fights for his children is diagnosed with the crime of caring too loudly. Observe the structural beauty of the trap they have built around you. If you present your case with cold surgical logic, calm, measured, devastatingly precise, they diagnose emotional stunting and fragile masculinity. If you show legitimate anger at the wreckage of your civilization, you are toxic, radicalized, a security risk. There is no behavioral state available to you that the system does not classify as pathological. This is what logicians call a Kafka trap. The act of defending yourself confirms your guilt. Your truth-telling is the symptom, their diagnosis is the verdict. The asymmetry is grotesque. A woman unhappy with her life is told to find herself, to blame the patriarchy, to march in the streets. Her suffering is sacred, individualized, politically useful. A man watching his civilization burn is told to man up, suppress his feelings, and take his SSRIs until the smoke looks like fog. The same therapeutic industrial complex that celebrates female emotional expression as liberation criminalizes male emotional honesty as danger. Female distress generates campaigns, male distress generates prescriptions. This is gamma bias rendered in clinical jargon, the systematic pathologizing of male cost-bearing, and the systematic valorization of female complaint. They have redefined harm itself to service this machinery. Harm once meant physical injury, a wound, a fracture, a measurable lesion. Now it means the psychological discomfort a progressive feels when confronted with an unwelcome fact. By equating offense with injury, they weaponize their own fragility and call it compassion. The demand for safe spaces is a demand for ideological quarantine zones where contradictory evidence cannot penetrate. You need therapy is not a medical observation. It is a rhetorical gag order, a thought-terminating cliché designed to terminate inquiry before it reaches a conclusion the regime cannot survive. Christ flipped the tables in the temple. By modern diagnostic standards, that is intermittent explosive disorder, a documented condition in the DSM-5, code 312.34. He would be medicated into compliance and ordered to process his trauma in a court-mandated program. The modern clinic is not a place of healing. It is the secular confessional of the therapeutic state, designed to shrive you of your natural right to rebellion. When the asylum is run by the inmates, the sane man is the heretic. Wear their diagnosis as a crown of thorns. It is the proof that you see the reality they are biologically and ideologically incapable of facing. But diagnosis is only the first valve on the pressure cooker. The therapeutic state sedates the man who refuses the lie. The spectacle distracts the millions who might otherwise notice what is being done to him. Having declared the sane man sick, the culture then entertains itself with the wreckage of the rest. The syringe and the laugh track are one instrument played in two registers, one clinical, one comedic, both engineered to make male suffering inaudible to itself. The clinic strips your dignity and calls it treatment. The screen strips your body and calls it content. And it was through that screen that I first understood the full architecture of the cruelty. The moment it stopped hiding behind credentials and walked on stage with a beer sponsor and a 4-second gag reel. The laughing funeral, the denial of free will, and the comedy of male disposability. I once watched a civilization become so thoroughly deadened to male suffering that a man's genital mutilation served as the punchline in a beer commercial during the Super Bowl. Millions erupted in laughter. The sound that gushed from their throats was not joy. It was the reflex of a conditioned organism responding to stimuli. Reverse the sexes and that commercial becomes a congressional hearing. A woman struck is a statistic, a crisis, a national emergency. A man destroyed is a joke. The sitcom trope, the dumb dad, the groin kick, the husband humiliated for 23 minutes before the credits roll is not comedy. It is the liturgy of a culture that has declared its load-bearing sex a disposable cartoon, fit only for mockery and the scrap heap. A man spends 30 years providing. He takes the dangerous shifts. He pays the mortgage. He misses his children's bedtimes so they can sleep in a warm house. Then his wife, steeped in a culture whispering that she deserves to find herself, files for divorce. The state strips him of his home, his children, his income, and his reputation in one clean bureaucratic motion. Society does not mourn. It applauds. Talk show hosts call it empowerment. His ex-wife's friends bring champagne. His own suffering is rewritten as justice. The beast of burden punished for pulling the cart too slowly. This is not a tragedy, it is a sitcom with a body count. When a progressive tells me male behavior is biologically determined, I do not argue. I agree with devastating enthusiasm. Yes, we are determined by biology, which is why men's superior spatial reasoning, aggression threshold, and risk tolerance make us natural leaders. If biology is destiny, patriarchy is an evolutionary inevitability. Watch them scatter from their own syllogism like rats from a burning grain silo. They want determinism for men because it dissolves male achievement into unearned privilege. They want radical agency for women, so every choice is empowerment, and every consequence is someone else's fault. That is not philosophy. It is the logistics of conquest disguised as neuroscience. Here is the formal collapse. Free will, the capacity of the rational soul, the imago Dei, to initiate action based on reason and moral choice, independent of pure deterministic instinct. Determinism, the materialist heresy that humans are meat automata, driven by neurochemistry and social conditioning. Now the syllogism. Premise 1, if human behavior is entirely determined by neurobiology and environment, moral responsibility is an illusion. Premise 2, the legal and cultural system holds men 100% responsible for their actions, financially, criminally, morally, while excusing women's actions as results of trauma or systemic oppression. In conclusion, this asymmetry violates the law of non-contradiction. The system does not believe in determinism. It believes in a weapon that uses determinism selectively aimed at men's throats. The data refuses to flatter the narrative. Men account for 92% of workplace fatalities, 78% of suicides, 97% of combat deaths. The overwhelming majority of victims of both criminal violence and state violence are male. Yet Congress passes a Violence Against Women Act while oil riggers, roofers, and miners are crushed, burned, and buried in silence, so deep their deaths do not even make the local news. The term male privilege is a semantic inversion so audacious it would make Orwell weep with professional envy. It is the privilege of the draft, the hazard pay, the family court gauntlet, and the presumed guilt. It is the privilege of the mule whipped for pulling, shot for stopping. The clown's gambit is total capitulation. Society demands men wear the jester's face, mocking their divorces, suicides, and disposability upon the stage so the crowd may laugh safely at blood that isn't theirs. A comedian jokes about his custody fight. A host chuckles over his lack of fatherhood. This is not bravery. It is a shield as solid as a hostage reciting a rehearsed line. The instant you cease laughing at your own pain, it ceases to be mere spectacle for those who loathe you. Shatter the fourth wall. Greet every quip regarding male anguish with a stillness that chills. That quiet is the only noise the background laughter cannot process. To deny free will is to deny sin. To deny sin is to deny the need for a savior. To deny the savior is to deny the logos, reason, order, meaning, God himself. If man is merely a biological algorithm processing stimuli, he cannot love, cannot sacrifice, cannot be saved. He is a taxpayer and a consumer, useful until the warranty expires. A civilization that strips its men of moral agency while harvesting their labor, their blood, and their children is not progressing. It is dying on schedule, following the same corpse map as every empire that forgot who carried the stones. The red-pilled man must reject this heresy with every fiber. You are not a meat machine. You are a sovereign soul endowed with the terrifying, magnificent burden of free choice. Stand bleeding if you must, but look the camera dead in the eye and demand your blood be counted. Refuse to be the punchline. Become the reckoning. I did not reject the lie of my own mechanical nature merely to go on breathing. I rejected it because a man who knows he has a soul cannot pretend that life is aimless consumption. He must ask the question the gynocracy works overtime to bury. What is my final purpose? What am I building that outlasts my pulse? Strip away the noise, the dating apps, the HR seminars, the alimony notices, the feminist refrains about emotional availability, and the question stands naked and unavoidable. The way it has stood before every man since the first one placed stone upon stone and wondered whether anyone would remember his name. That question is the threshold. Cross it, and you meet the man who understood the answer before we forgot it entirely. The final horizon. What the last day reveals about the lie of the gynocracy. The men who built the aqueducts understood something we've forgotten, that a structure lasts only as long as the man who built it is willing to inspect its stones with his own hands, even as the breath leaves his body. The dying Roman engineer does not recline on silk cushions in the Colosseum box, surrounded by dancers and wine. He walks the arcades one final time, feeling the water flow through channels he chiseled into the living rock, because that current is his immortality speaking to the future. This is what we call telos, the final cause, the ultimate purpose for which a thing exists. An aqueduct exists to carry water. A man exists to build what carries life beyond his own span. The modern world has inverted this so thoroughly that a man on his deathbed is now expected to apologize to the women who extracted his resources, forgive the institutions that robbed his children, and leave his estate to the state that slandered his name. That is not a death. That is a surrender to the lie that his life was merely a prelude to consumption. Consider the data of genuine regret. Bronnie Ware's palliative care recordings, gathered over years of sitting with the dying, document the top regrets with crushing consistency. Men do not say, "I wish I'd spent more hours at the office earning alimony." They do not say, "I regret not being more emotionally available to my second wife's therapist." They say, "I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me." That is a man confessing. He wore the mask the gynocracy sewed for him until it fused with his face. The therapeutic industrial complex has weaponized the question, what would you do with one day left, as a compliance audit? When the HR manager, the progressive counselor, or the podcast interviewer asks it, they are fishing for the blue pill catechism. Travel, eat, forgive everyone, hold hands, expire to a Spotify playlist. That answer is the confession of a creature that never graduated from appetite to duty. The bucket list is perhaps the most diabolical piece of emotional engineering ever imposed on dying men. It teaches that life is a shopping spree of sterile aesthetic experiences. See the northern lights, eat fugue in Tokyo, skydive over a beach, and that death is the moment you hand your completed checklist to the cosmic concierge. This is consumerism gilded with the rhetoric of self-fulfillment. The bucket list is a distraction device designed to keep a man's eyes fixed on the trivial while the extraction of his estate proceeds in the back room. A man who is busy planning a hot air balloon ride over Cappadocia is not busy reviewing his trust documents, not teaching his teenage son how to handle a false accusation, not securing his assets against the final assault of the family court system. The bucket list is the opiate of the dying middle class. The man who falls for it dies impoverished in every sense that matters. Now drill into the word legacy from the Latin legare. To send, to bequeath, to commission. It is not a feeling. It is not a warm glow in the chest or a tribute montage. Legacy is the permanent structural alteration of reality that remains after your body returns to the elements from which it was forged. When a Roman father gathered his sons on the last day, he did not say, "Boys, remember that I loved you." He handed them the tools of the trade, the deeds to the land, the secrets of the water table, the names of the trustworthy and the treacherous. He paid his debts and forgave his enemies, because forgiveness is a transfer of grievance from your ledger to the logos, not a surrender of justice. The modern father on his deathbed cannot hand his sons a trade because he never learned one, cannot hand them a covenant because his marriage was a lease with an exit clause, cannot hand them a faith because he substituted therapy for worship. All he can hand them is a credit card balance and a court order. The gynocratic trap embedded in the question is subtler still. When a woman, HR manager, therapist, ex-wife, daughter raised on feminist pedagogy, asks you this question, she is testing your compliance to the emotional economy. She expects you to say, "I would tell my family I love them," because that is the script that reassures her that your final act will center her comfort, her closure, her narrative. She does not want to hear, "I would go to confession, settle my accounts, sharpen my sword, teach my son one final lesson, and die facing the enemy." The feminine imperative demands that death be domesticated, made safe, soft, turned into a pillow fight of emotional validation. The masculine imperative demands that death be faced with eyes open, spine straight, and a clear understanding that the only judgment that matters is not the opinion of the living, but the verdict of the eternal. There is a reason the classical world called the art of dying well ars moriendi, a skill to be practiced, not a crisis to be managed with benzodiazepines and apologies. The memento mori tradition is not morbid neuroticism. It is the ultimate reality filter. The man who lives every day as if it were his last is the man who cannot be blackmailed by the state, cannot be shamed by the HR department, cannot be panicked by the dating market. When cancellation is the worst thing that can happen to you, you are a slave to the mob. When death has already been integrated into your daily consciousness, the mob has no leverage. You can tell the truth about female nature, about family court corruption, about the biological architecture of hypergamy, because you have already accepted the only cost that actually matters, betraying reality to please a crowd that will not remember your name in 50 years. You now see the whole machine, top to bottom, the gears and the levers and the unpaid interns who grease them with male tears, the service worker shibboleth, the diagnostic inquisition, the laugh track over male graves, and the bucket list bankruptcy of the gynocratic last day question. These are not four separate problems. They are one four-headed parasite feeding on the same host, your belief that you owe the matrix your soul. You do not. The waiter test was never about virtue. It was about training you to smile while eating cold food and calling it personal growth. The therapy referral was never about healing. It was Soviet psychiatry repackaged with better fonts. The sitcom groin kick was never comedy. It was conditioning a society that laughs at a man's castration will not weep at his grave. And that final day question, what would you do, was the ultimate trap, because the only acceptable answers were consumption, apology, and quiet extinction. You just walked out of the trap with the door still swinging. That is what you gained here. You are immune now, and immunity of the mind is the one vaccine they cannot mandate. I will tell you what a man actually does with his last day, because I have watched men die, and the ones who died well did not go to Paris. The Roman engineer inspecting his aqueduct on the morning of his death understood something that the woman planning her third destination wedding in Tulum never will. Legacy is not what you consumed. It is what still stands after you are gone. The father who gathers his sons passes down the deed to the land, settles the debt with the blacksmith, names his heir, blesses his bloodline, and then turns to face his maker. That man cheats the gynocracy of its final harvest. The state cannot tax a blessing. An ex-wife cannot alienate a sacrament. A probate court cannot divide a son's memory of his father standing upright at the end, refusing the morphine drip of a meaningless culture that wanted him gone quietly. Roughly 70% of divorces are initiated by women, and the number one deathbed regret of men is not, "I wish I had been more emotionally available to a culture that despised me." It is, "I wish I had lived with purpose instead of paying for someone else's." You now hold the antidote to that regret in your hands. It is called telos, and no HR department, no family court magistrate, and no Netflix algorithm can prescribe it, patent it, or cancel it. Here is the uncomfortable, magnificent truth that every one of you who made it this far now possesses. You cannot be governed by a system you have seen through. That is the irreversible property of logos. Once a man knows the service worker test is a frame, he cannot unknow it. Once he sees that the DSM is a political instrument and not a scientific text, he cannot unsee it. Once he understands that a civilization which denies his free will, while laughing at his corpse, has forfeited its moral claim to his obedience, he is free, and freedom is a loaded weapon that the frightened call dangerous. I am asking you to be dangerous in the precise way that truth makes a man dangerous. Calm, unbribable, and impossible to confuse with a meat machine. Go to your brothers who are still sleeping, still apologizing for their steaks, still laughing at the groin kick commercials, still paying the therapist to validate the woman who is extracting his estate. Tell them what you learned here. Hand them this essay like a man hands a lantern in a tunnel. Do it not because you are generous, but because a civilization that medicates its builders while subsidizing its consumers will fall, and you will need every waking man at his post when it does. Sponsored book. Red Pill Boundaries, Protect Your Mind and Life. You've been lied to. They told you equality was possible, that vulnerability was strength, that your natural instincts were toxic. I bought those lies once. I watched my first marriage collapse because I prioritized her needs over my boundaries. I lost a promotion to a less qualified colleague after HR lectured me on tone policing. I nearly joined the 73% of men who die within 5 years of retirement, broke and forgotten. This book exists because I rebuilt myself from that wreckage using principles our ancestors carved in stone and modern cowards want buried. This isn't therapy, it's a war manual for men who refuse to become statistics. You'll learn why 93% of fathers lose custody battles, Harvard 2021, and how to bulletproof your assets. Discover the Navy SEAL tactic that claws back 20 hours weekly from digital vampires. Implement the 20% savings rule that boosted my net worth by 400% in 8 years. These aren't theories, they're battlefield-tested protocols from my consulting work with 217 high-performing CEOs, athletes, and divorced fathers who reclaimed their lives. Weak men and their enablers won't like what's here. If you think toxic masculinity is anything but a linguistic trap to neuter your assertiveness, close this book now. Go binge Netflix dramas where men cry while their women lead. This is for builders, fighters, and survivors, men who see the Harvard study proving weak work-life boundaries spike heart disease by 37% and choose granite over gelatin. We'll dissect the MIT data exposing smartphone addiction as chemical warfare on your discipline. You'll copy the warrior protocol that reversed my testosterone crash at 42, merging monastic fasting with barbell squat. Ever heard of boundary Darwinism? You'll apply it to nuke energy vampires from your career in bed. Final warning, non-target readers exit. Now, this isn't your girlfriend's empowerment memoir. It's a demolition charge for the lies holding you back. You'll leave with actionable rules, not platitudes, to dominate your finances, relationships, and health. The system wants you soft, distracted, and compliant. Let's rebuild your spine. Red Pill Boundaries, Protect Your Mind and Life. Written by Conrad Reiche. Buy now. Links in description.